Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the second day of the conference. Allow me to introduce our keynote speaker of the day, Her Excellency Maryam Al-Maheri, and she is the UAE Minister of Climate Change and Environment.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to address you, and I thank the Atlantic Council and Trends Research and Advisory for hosting this important conference. The devastating floods in Pakistan, the severe drought and heat waves that swept across Europe last summer, and the destructive wildfires in the United States of America and other countries are wake-up calls for all of us on the urgency of preparing for a new climate reality. At the heart of the new reality is the Middle East, that is among the world's regions most vulnerable to climate change, with projections of dire and far-reaching impacts manifested in even higher temperatures, increased water stress, rising sea levels, and shrinking arable land. These challenges are intertwined and together are already triggering worsening situations of displacement, resource competition, socioeconomic stress, and food and water and energy insecurity that cast a shadow on national security in the region and paint a bleak future for us. Enabling more ambitious climate action in terms of mitigation and adaptation from the Middle East region is a priority to ensure we avert worst-case scenarios. In the UAE, we believe in multilateralism as a powerful vehicle for creating the sustainable future we want our children to live in. To advance collective action, we are keen on building regional synergies to align our response to climate change. Our country is also a premier convener of regional climate action events, such as the first ever MENA Climate Week, which took place in March this year. And all these aim to boost the momentum of climate action and support a new low-carbon development path in the region. The need to step up collective climate action and develop a coordinated response has never been clearer, as climate change-driven extreme weather events are taking a heavy toll on people's lives and livelihoods, as well as our precious environment. The UAE is committed to pursuing a climate-neutral development path and turning its pledges into concrete actions and outcomes. We were the first in the region to join the race to zero by launching the UAE Net Zero by 2050 strategic initiative last year. We are currently developing the National Strategy for Net Zero 2050 to inform our next steps and chart our path towards climate neutrality. To achieve this target, we are investing heavily in expanding our clean energy capacity. To date, we have spent over $40 billion on clean energy projects locally. As a result, the UAE is home to 3 of the largest in capacity and lowest in cost solar plants in the world. It is also the first country in the region to build a commercial-scale carbon capture, utilization and storage facility, launch an industrial-scale green hydrogen project, and deploy zero-emission nuclear power. Our clean energy capacity is on track to reach 14 gigawatts by 2030. Earlier this year, we have pledged to invest an additional $50 billion in clean energy ventures at home and abroad over the next decade to tackle climate change. We also leverage nature-based solutions to enhance environmental sustainability. For instance, we are on a mission to plant an additional 100 million mangroves by 2030. Our mangrove forests help us sequester CO2, protect our coasts from storm surges, and provide critical habitats for biodiversity. Ladies and gentlemen, with the next 2 COPs taking place in the Middle East, climate action is at the top of our agenda, and we stand ready to join forces with all countries from this region to put us on track for a sustainable future. The progress made so far proves the strength of collective efforts. We need to continue to push past our limits and to work together to build a secure future for people and the planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for the great speech. And now let's begin with the first session of today, titled Between COP27 and COP28, Diplomatic Efforts of Middle Eastern Countries in Addressing Climate Change. This panel will be moderated by my great colleague, Mr. Awad al-Breki, who is the Chief Global Officer at Trends Research and Advisory.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our fourth session. In our second day of our conference, I would like, on behalf of Dr. Mohammed Al-Ali, to welcome all of you in this panel. In this panel, the theme is titled Between COP28 and COP27 and 28, Diplomatic Effort of Middle Eastern Countries in Addressing Climate Change. We're going to initially focus on exploring the role of climate summits in facilitating a transition to a lower carbon economy. At the same time, we'll also try to explore how geopolitical factors relate to climate diplomacy. We have four great speakers today joining us in person, Sheikh Hashamma, and also two virtual, Prof. Biswas, and to immediate left, Nuran Atif, and also pre-recording speech by Osama Al-Johari. We're going to have initial 10-minute remarks from each speaker, then we're going to engage in Q&A session. And now let me introduce our esteemed panelists. Sheikh Hashamma bin Sultan bin Khalifa Al Nahyan, Executive Director of UAE Independent Climate Change Accelerator, and she leads the Alliance for Global Sustainability. Sheikh Hashamma is founder of Reset MENA and the founder of Sheikh Hashamma bin Sultan Sustainability Initiative and the co-founder of Aurora 50. She currently serves as a member of UAE Circular Economy Council, UAE Center for Environmental Law and Policy, the Academy of International Business in MENA region. In 2020, Sheikh Hashamma was appointed Honorary President of the Emirates Green Building Council and received the prestigious Twin Tower Award in 2021. In 2022, she was selected as the first woman from the GCC to participate in the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center's Women Leader in Energy and Climate Fellowship. To my immediate left, Ms. Nuran Atif. She is Regional Coordinator for Middle East and North Africa at the United Nations Environment Programme Finance Initiative. Also joining us, Osama Al-Johari, Assistant to the Prime Minister of Egypt and the Chairman of Information and Decision Support Center to the Egyptian Cabinet. And our last speaker is Professor Asad Biswas, is Distinguished Visiting Professor at the University of Glasgow, UK, and Gujarat University in India. Dr. Biswas is the Director of Water Management International in Singapore and the Chief Executive of the Third World Center for Water Management in Mexico. He is the author of, or editor of 89 books. His work has been translated to more than 42 languages, and also the founder of International Journal of Water Resources Development, and it was its editor-in-chief for its first 29 years. With that, I would like to kick off our panel today with Dr. Asad. Dr. Asad, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Let me make some few initial comments. When COP26 ended in Glasgow, we are more optimistic than we are at present. We did not expect the geopolitics to change so dramatically in 2022. Middle East is a part of the world, and so it is not immune from the geopolitical angles as either. So what did we see? Basically, from my perspective, the initiative and the emphasis on the climate that was generated by COP26 was mostly broken in the early 2022, at least in terms of climate diplomacy, because of several geopolitical events which none of us expected. First was the Ukraine war, which basically changed the energy supply in Europe created a lot of problems. It resulted in an energy crisis, food crisis, and current high level of inflation. As a result, at least 24 countries I advise at the ministerial or the prime ministerial level, I have to be honest and say climate is not at the top of the agenda, even though they realize it's one of the most important issues for the future. So basically, we are living in a time when we're seeing the impacts of climate change very vividly. In fact, 5 years ago, we scientists did not think by 2022 we'll see so many major changes, impacts due to climate change. Just much more significant than we expected. And the future, only God knows what the future will bring. But unless we take action, I don't see very much change in the next several decades. Now, the other biggest problem that I see in the climate scene is two of the world's greatest carbon emitters are China and United States. And unfortunately, now the climate diplomacy between China and United States is completely broken. After Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, China has refused to join any discussion on climate issues with the United States. I don't think it's a major development, but an adverse development because these are the two largest carbon emitters. Now, looking to the Middle East. In fact, UAE was one of the first to come out with their climate carbon neutrality by 2050 before the COP26 meeting in Glasgow. One of the issues we see now is most of the Middle Eastern countries, except MENA countries, except for one or two who have not come out with a very specific target, most of them have agreed to get carbon neutral by 2050 or 2060. The question now is, how are they going to do it? That's going to be a major problem. Main emphasis on all the discussions I've seen so far is on technological development. Of course, that will play a main part. But the other important issue, which we have not talked very much, is the behavioral changes needed in the people, both in the Middle East and all over the world, as a result of which our resource use, all types of resource use, become more efficient. I have not seen any detailed roadmap on how all the countries will reach carbon neutrality by 2050 or peak carbon by 2030 or thereabout. As people say, the devil is in the details. So unless we see what are the plans and how they're planning to do that, it's very difficult to see how they can achieve. Carbon capture is one of the important issues. Her Excellency mentioned that one, but we are at least a decade away before carbon capture becomes commercially viable. And what is important is to figure out what do we do with that captured carbon. We have to find some use for it. And I haven't seen much use of this captured carbon. So there's a lot of work going on carbon capture, but we still need a long way to go. And there are many other issues, especially in the Middle Eastern countries. One of the major resources is water. In fact, the petroleum industry cannot work, or the gas industry cannot work without large quantity of water. And if I look at all the Middle Eastern countries with all the plans for carbon neutral, I have not seen a detailed plan for any any water utility or desalination group, how to become carbon neutral. The emphasis is, of course, one of the important part is how to reduce electricity required per cubic meter of water desalinated. Saudi Arabia is making remarkable progress and probably now the leading country now in terms of there. But the question then is, how do we make both the operational activities of the water utilities and the capital investment of water utilities carbon neutral? And here I want to share with you what is the importance of behavioral changes. In the many of the Middle Eastern countries, per capita water use now is 300 to 700 liters per capita per person. That is too much for any country, including even worse in Middle East, because all water is basically in many of the countries, most of the water is desalinated. So the question has to start from, how do we change your behavior? Why does an average person in a certain country or a city need 700 liters of water when people in a similar high temperature country, the middle, say around the Mediterranean, need 100 liters per capita per day? So we have to start thinking about some very fundamental question about our behavioral changes. And one problem I have with our climate community is that we have giving almost all exclusive thought on technological changes, but not enough on how do we change the behavior, because it's, after all, we people who how much we need all of the resources, our lifestyle, which will define the amount of energy that we'll be using. So that is one of the major issue I see. And the second one I would like to share with you is some of the plans like of Saudi Arabia or UAE are outstanding. If they can do this energy transition properly, they can develop a new form of economic activity where they could be world leader. We're told, Her Excellency mentioned green hydrogen. Yes, that's going to be a major issue in the future. But on the green hydrogen, what is happening now, if I look at China, is one of the countries I've been advising since 1980. China now can produce electrolyzer at 1/3 to 1/4 of the cost of the West. So the issue is now, one of the issue now I'd like to suggest to the Middle Eastern research councils that instead of reinventing the wheel, try to develop some transformational research in these areas, R&D in these areas, as a result of which some of the countries of the Middle East would be forefront of research. By doing Me Too type of research, I'm afraid it will be counterproductive. A lot of money will be spent, but it will not bring a new economic stream of activity and a new stream of carbon reduction as well. So I see a lot of challenges with the Middle East in these areas, but not only challenges, if the countries play the challenges properly, the benefits are immense. If Saudi Arabia, UAE can really make some R&D breakthrough in some of the new technologies that could be made, the countries could be one of the leaders in the world. But every country is competing with each other. In many ways it is good, but in other ways, one needs to look at the global scene and see what are the competitive advantages and how do we enhance that competitive advantage in those countries in terms of R&D. That is one part I'm not seeing very much in the Middle Eastern countries, which I advise that they're not looking seriously what are the competitive advantages and how do they take that advantage to make it one of the biggest money earner employment generation of their countries. So with these few words, I would like to say it's a pleasure joining this meeting. I hope it will come out with some good suggestions, doable, implementable suggestions, so that it takes the work that the Middle Eastern countries one peg higher in their quest for carbon neutrality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Asad. I totally agree with you that R&D and also research on climate change would be a very critical in any climate action in the future, and also this kind of summit like COP26 and 7 and 8 is actually facilitating that kind of finance and also research. As I promised you, I know you have a lot of commitment, Professor Asad. I would like to ask you one question in the first part of your presentation regarding UAE. As you know, the COP26 in Glasgow has a message of strengthening their 2030 climate plans. On September 12, 2022, the UAE has increased its greenhouse emission reduction target from 23.5% to 31% by 2030. However, only a few other countries, for example, Australia, Egypt, and India, have submitted updated plans. Why has there been a loss of momentum in this regard from your perspective? And how do we encourage major emitters countries to come to the table and submit and also implement more aggressive climate plans, especially as you mentioned the US-China competition regarding also a Pelosi visit to Taiwan?
It will be, let us be quite honest, this year, next year with the COP, I don't think in Sharm el-Sheikh, one of the major questions that will come up. I know Egypt wants to discuss on the adaptation, to what extent adaptation has been successful or the countries have succeeded. But one of the major issues that was not discussed in COP26 will come up certainly in COP27 and again in 28, perhaps in COP29 and in COP30, is how do we help the most vulnerable countries with the financing? Whatever the developed countries have promised to these vulnerable countries, that has not come through. Much of that has not come through. And whatever even has come through has come, by last calculation, overwhelming majority has come to the loans. Now, these most vulnerable countries, talking to the leader,
Dr. Asad, you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you clearly. Can you?
Yes.
Yes. So what I'm saying is these most vulnerable countries will go to COP27 and COP28 and say, look, we don't want loans, we want grants, and can you provide us those grants? And the fact is, whatever that was promised is not going to be enough. We have to think about more. So main issue I see in the COP27, COP28, and even thereafter is how do we provide enough financing for these most vulnerable countries so that they can do something about the climate plan. And most of the developed countries are now in a financial bind. So I don't think realistically much, though I hope I'll be proved wrong, but much realistically, I don't expect that developed countries going to COP27 and saying that we will provide you the funds which we promised in the past and some extra as well. So the financing part in COP27 is going to be a big issue in discussion. It will be, my guess is realistically COP28, COP29 onwards, this will be an ongoing discussion in the COPs for the next 4 to 5 years.
Thank you, Dr. Asad, for this insights and presentation. And I would like now to switch to Nouran Atif to give us her remarks. Nouran, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Awad, and it's a pleasure to be here with you, and thanks to the Atlantic Council and Trends for organizing this session. I'm Are my slides? Yes, I can see my slides now. Thank you so much. Can we move to the next slide? So I will be speaking today with you regarding the new visions for building a sustainable environmental framework, and I will be speaking from the financial perspective. So to quickly acquaint you with UNEP-FI, so the United Nations Environment Programme Finance Initiative is a partnership between UNEP and the global finance industry at large. And we aim to help create an industry that serves people and the planet. And we do this by working together with our members as a member-based institution to mainstream the notion of sustainable finance by setting industry-based standards, principles, and norms. Next slide, please. In this slide, you will see the momentum that has been growing around the world and the timeline of UNEP-FI as well. So UNEP-FI was established in 1992, and this year we are celebrating our 30th anniversary. In 2006, you will see that there was the first initiative that was launched, which was the Principles for Responsible Investment. And then in 2012, we had the Principles for Sustainable Insurance, moving up to 2015, where we all witnessed the launch of the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. And then moving forward, we see that there was a need to develop the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, seeing how climate impacts the finance and the other way around. And in 2019, we launched the Principles for Responsible Banking, which is our flagship initiative so far. And then towards the years to follow, there were a number of net zero alliances that were launched as well, up until COP26 and COP27 happening this year. So this shows that there is a movement and growth and a need for new frameworks that are coming up as we move ahead. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, UNEP-FI is a member-based institution, and we welcome new members from the finance sector from all over the world. As I speak today, we have over 400 members globally covering the three arms of the finance industry: the banking, the insurance, and the investment. With the majority of our membership from the banking sector. And the MENA region still remains the youngest of the membership that we have in terms of population, with a total of 11 members out of the 42 members in Africa and the Middle East. Next slide, please. Also, to provide a quick overview on the 11 members that we have, they are mostly populated in Egypt, with 7 members in Egypt specifically, including Bank Misr, including Commercial International Bank, CIB, Alex Bank, Intesa Sanpaolo Group, Arab African International Bank, and others as well. But we also have representation from Morocco, from Bahrain, and the UAE, having on board First Abu Dhabi Bank, which is one of the largest 10 banks in the MENA region. And next slide, please. Thank you. So as mentioned at UNEP-FI, our work is operates in some sort of a matrix where we have the thematic work, but also the industry-based work, where we have work on climate change, nature, SDGs and impact, social issues, and most recently, pollution and resource efficiency. And on the other side, when it comes to the industries, we have, as mentioned, the Principles for Responsible Investment, which was launched in 2006 by UNEP-FI and the UN Global Compact, and it is applied by half of the world's institutional investors of approximately 83 trillion US dollars. And then we have the Principles for Sustainable Insurance, which was established in 2012 by UNEP-FI, and today is applied by 1/4 of the world's insurers, 25% of the world premium, and is supported by a global network of leading insurance industry initiatives, insurance associations, regulators, and supervisors. And of course, the Principles for Responsible Banking, which I will be shedding light on right now. Next slide, please. The reason why I want to discuss specifically the Principles for Responsible Banking is because of the majority of our members are the banking institutions. but also because the timeline of the PRB kind of coincides with COP27 happening in Egypt and in the MENA this year. So to recap on or to explain the principles for responsible banking, in 2017, we saw the need to develop an overarching set of principles that is specifically designed for banking institutions, providing a framework for sustainable finance that tackles the strategic, the operational, and the transactional level of banks. And it was developed with the members. There was a core group of banking institutions that was established, including banks from developing and developed countries as well, so that we ensure that it is something that is applicable by any bank at any state of their sustainability journey and context. And it was also brought together as well a group of civil society advisors in academia, and is now signed by over 250 signatory banks, collectively holding more than $60 trillion in assets, or 65 trillion in asset. And that is approximately 40% of the global banking sector. So it is a huge initiative that we have. And next slide, please. The PRB in specific are a set of 6 principles and it is process-oriented, so it's not result-oriented, because we understand that each bank adopts the PRB, as we call them, according to their journey. And they can adapt it how they need it the most. And it aims to support the banks to align their strategies and operations with the global, regional, and institutional needs, so that they are as relevant as possible and as tailored as possible. It supports the banks to also look within so that they identify their impacts within their operations, but also on the society and the community in which they operate. Identify, analyzing also based on customers and stakeholders, they are able to set targets that are tailored and relevant to the needs of the community, to the needs of the bank to ensure its growth, and to support their contribution to the achievement of the SDGs. Of course, this is coupled with a governance and accountability and transparency framework to ensure the soundness of the commitment and to prevent greenwashing. Next slide, please. As mentioned, that the PRB is a process-oriented framework. It is implemented over a 4-year journey where they will start by analyzing the bank's impact, understanding the baseline, how is the bank operating, and then setting the targets, and then having the accountability and measuring of their progress. And UNEP-FI supports the signatory banks of the PRB through every step by providing capacity building, technical assistance program, and so on. Next slide, please. And this is an example of the different guidance document. So as Professor was mentioning, the need for R&D, we work with the members to ensure that there is R&D happening through different programs or different projects. We recently have a project that I was going to mention in the presentation, but I can shed light on later on. We aim to do that with the members or with the banks so that we ensure that it's relevant, it's attainable, and something that they can work on. This is an example of some of the guidance documents on how to implement the principles for responsible banking. How can your bank create impact? How can you contribute to bridging the financing gap? And I mean, looking also specifically on the MENA region, I believe that the financing gap in the MENA region is approximately 2.5 trillion. So there are a lot of things that need to be done. The PRB can be implemented globally, but also on a regional level, as because of its adaptability within the banks, it can affect different banks. And next slide, please. So last year, we had a collective report where in celebration of the first year of the PRB, and we looked at how the banks perceived what impact did the PRB create on the banking industry, considering that it is important and it is essential in this fight against climate change and in achieving the SDGs, in transitioning to sustainable finance business models. And we realized that as a result to that, 94% of the banks that contributed to that survey or to that collective report now identify sustainability as a strategic priority. And the top achievement that we were able to identify was that around 2.3 trillion US dollars were mobilized for sustainable finance, which is, it's really great because this is a tangible, quantifiable success that we can relate to. It is worth mentioning that also the members, all the members that we have in the MENA region are part of the UNEP-FI PRB. They're all signatories of the PRB. Because in the next slide, please, I'm going to be shedding light on the UN-convened Net Zero Banking Alliance. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the Net Zero Banking Alliance is also looking at another framework that is available, was launched in 2021 at Glasgow in COP26 by the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero and is accredited by Race to Zero. It is among the 7 other net zero alliances that go beyond banking as well, and it represents around 40% of the global banking assets who commit to aligning their lending investment portfolio with net zero by 2050 to abide by the 1.5 degrees Celsius ambition. This is done by implementing decarbonization strategies in a coherent guiding framework that is developed in partnership with the members of the alliance as well. And in the MENA region, we have 2 banks that are part of this alliance, Commercial International Bank in Egypt and First Abu Dhabi Bank in the UAE. And it is important to mention that because, as Professor was mentioning, that there are countries that announced their net zero targets for 2050 and 2060, but also looking at Commercial International Bank in Egypt. Egypt specifically has not announced the net zero targets. They announced decarbonization efforts or a reduction of GHG emissions, but the banks still, CIB still joined the Net Zero Banking Alliance. So this shows that there's strong momentum and initiative for the banking institutions in the region. And I would like to conclude my discussion also quickly and in relation to COP27 is that with this growing momentum and awareness that we need to mobilize financing towards the SDGs and the significant role of the banking industry, both COP27 and COP28, as mentioned, they are happening in the region, which is very significant in supporting the transition of the MENA to adjust financing and sustainable business models that support in the fight against climate change and support in enhancing the business operations that are already in process. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the questions to elaborate further.
Thank you, Nouran. Yes, financing and banking is important, but also, as you mentioned, the help of private sector and civil society to channel that money to the climate change actions. We will engage in Q&A session at the end, Nouran. I would like now to switch to our third speaker, Osama Al-Johari, as a pre-record speech.
Ladies and gentlemen, it brings me great pleasure to be here with you today for this special event. Please allow me to express my gratitude to the esteemed members of Trends Research Advisory for coordinating this event and the Atlantic Council for allowing me to be enlightened by your insights today and to share with you mine. The world is faced with a multiple set of crises that are challenging the multilateral diplomatic process of facing the very hard issue that are facing planet Earth, particularly global warming. The climate change crisis is part of the greater ongoing worldwide globalization process where issues, including those associated with the environment, affect the world. The unfolding over the past 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic touched every corner of the world. However, the issue from a scientific and environmental standpoint is undisputable. Given the scientific proofs of the danger posed by climatic transformations to countries, in terms of fires, hurricanes, floods, and even the overflow of island nations. In terms of the direct effects they pose for human health as the result of heat and drought and the indirect impacts on food resources in particular. These dangers have made it especially necessary for nations to cooperate to work out solutions that no one country alone, no matter what its reaches or power can deal with it. Unfortunately, despite the growing global tendency for cooperation, the classic geopolitical world of conflicts, competitions, and tensions didn't stop its dynamics of rivalries. The Ukrainian-Russian crisis that turned into war starting from February 24th this year complicated further world politics as the crisis turned into tensions between key intrinsic parties to the climate change issue by their responsibilities on global warming. Multilateral negotiations are becoming more difficult and complex. Aside from the polemics of who is responsible for the global warming, the impacts of global change are hard to ignore. Between 2030 and 2050, climate change is expected to cause approximately 250,000 additional deaths per year from malnutrition, malaria, diarrhea, and heat stress alone. The direct damage costs to health are estimated to be between 2 to 4 billion US dollars per year by 2030. Areas with weak health infrastructure, mostly in developing countries, will be the least able to cope without assistance to prepare and respond according to World Health Organization. Away from all the debates on the issue, at COP26, the United States and China issued a joint declaration committing to cooperate on a variety of climate change issues, including developing regulatory frameworks and environmental standards to reduce greenhouse gases emissions, encouraging decarbonization and electrification of end-use sectors, and fostering the circular economy. The declaration specifically recognized the role that methane emissions play in climate change, and both countries agreed to increase action to reduce methane emissions in the 2020s. Egypt will be affected by climate change, as it faces many risks in main areas. Firstly, increasing the severity of drought, especially that 86% of Egypt's lands fall within the driest areas worldwide, which means an increase in the dangers of desertification and drought. Secondly, the rise of the Mediterranean Sea due to the melting of the ice of the two poles, thus threatening to drown vast inhabited areas. Thirdly, melting of the North Pole will allow creating a sea bypass that will link East and West trade, thus competing with the Suez Canal in Egypt. As the host country to COP27, Egypt is determined to do its part to make the occasion fruitful and enhancing global safety. Egypt, in its role as a conference president, will spare no effort to ensure that COP27 becomes the moment when the world moved from negotiation to implementation and where words were translated to actions. Yet, it will be very difficult to enhance these noble objectives while the world is set on fire that its heat might escalate into a nuclear inferno. It is important at this moment to call on peace, loving countries, and those who are committed to the United Nations conventions and commitments to work harder on finding a settlement for the conflict in Ukraine and decline on the American and Chinese tensions. A truce during COP27 will be very much helpful to give more chances for thinking how to work the important issues of global warming and cooling the level of violence that might lead to escalation. It is a time to save the planet through implementation of commitments and find a diplomatic resolution to geopolitical conflicts. Humanity cannot take more complex crises that defy solutions. Last but not least, I would like to thank Trends Advisory Research for inviting me to this event. Thank you and wish you fruitful and successful discussions.
Thank you, Mr. Osama. If you hear us, so thank you for this pre-record presentation. We are very delighted. We are Trends at Atlantic to have in person Sheikh Shamma with us. In person, which shows actually her strong commitment to the cause of climate change. So Sheikh Shamma, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Al-Bareki, for your kind introduction. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. A big thank you to Trends Research and Advisory and the Atlantic Council. The world is facing climate change on a growing level right now. Temperatures in my region, the Middle East, are 4 times the global average. Research by MIT states that by 2100, my region will be uninhabitable. This summer, we've experienced heat waves across Europe. We've experienced, whilst I was in the UK, a heat wave, and the headlines were shocking, that there were wildfires on the outskirts of London. Here in the United States, Texas has had its fair share of disasters, including floods and extreme cold. And as we speak and convene today, Hurricane Ian in Florida is causing devastation. Climate change increases the proportion of Category 4 and 5 hurricanes. The climate crisis that we are facing collectively has no borders. This summer, we've seen devastating floods in Pakistan. The climate crisis is happening as we speak. Since June, and continuing for 6 months, annual monsoons along the river of Kabul created 3 to 6 times more flooding than usual. To put this into perspective, 1/3 of Pakistan is underwater. That is 3 times the size of Portugal. The number of fatalities and displaced people are heartbreaking. Even after the floods have left the headlines, the water is still there and people are facing the consequences. Flash floods drove one family from their home when water rushed through their rooms in the middle of the night. Though they were able to save their lives, their home was destroyed and their sugarcane crop, their only source of income, was washed away. They're currently living in a tent, surrounded by 2,000 people in the same situation. This family is just one example. Pakistan's foreign minister said that while they've had floods every year during this time, this is, and I quote, an entirely new level of climate-led catastrophe. International aid organizations estimated up to 6 months for the water to recede, but the effects on health, livelihoods, and housing will last a long time. This is not a theoretical problem, nor a problem of the future. This is happening right now. So what does this mean for the rest of the world? The floods in Pakistan have caused an enormous loss in grain exports from the 3rd largest producer of wheat in Asia. global food and resources are severely impacted. In Syria, the exodus of people resulted in the worst refugee crisis since World War II. The effects of any major event is not isolated to one country. And this is not enough for individual countries to work solutions on their own. We are all in this together. In my country, the United Arab Emirates, we are deeply aware of the mutual challenge of climate change. Sustainability and mutual support have been embedded in our culture since the inception of our nation 50 years ago. And over those 50 years, we've built and engaged with international networks for climate cooperation. Due to the urgency of climate change, I set up the UAE's independent climate change accelerators. We are convening the public, private, and third sector to provide policy recommendations to government. We aim to accelerate the green economy, to incentivize the private sector, and to hold them accountable to their commitments. As the head of the UAE's independent climate change accelerators, I'm proud to see the UAE's galvanizing role in both social and environmental commitments. And I am honored that the UAE will be hosting COP28 next year. And our priority will be to bring together local and global stakeholders. In order to reach our ambitious goals, it is imperative that we mobilize the entire ecosystem. I am grateful that I will be leading this role, and we will play a significant role during COP27 and COP28. Our accelerators will unite stakeholders to enable more collaboration, cooperation, and innovation towards our common goal. We will also act as a catalyst for the transition to a green economy. We will advise on positive climate action. We will attract global talent to the UAE's sustainability sector and facilitate international partnerships. These are fundamentals that will drive our nation's commitments to achieving net zero by 2050. However, this is just our first milestone. Our ambition goes way beyond 2050. I invite you all, as the members of the international community for climate action, to join our global cause. On the screen, you'll see a QR code. Please share your big ideas with us. If they align to our mandate, we look forward to engaging with you. My goal is that by working together, we can build a more sustainable tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheikh Shamma, for this very informative presentation. And I would like now to kick our Q&A session. I'll start with you, Sheikh Shamma. As you know, the global energy crisis and the growing food insecurity and also the war in Ukraine have actually divided nation and also distracted attention of government to climate talks and to climate summits. From your perspective, how can climate diplomacy be used to mediate and also to bridge the geopolitical division, as well as advance its core agenda of promoting effective multilateral action on climate change?
Thank you for your question. Although many nations are experiencing unrest at the moment due to geopolitical factors, NGOs like the UAE's independent climate change accelerators can promote multilateralism across all sectors. We are working with international partners, we're working with everyone to deal with the climate crisis, and our focus is climate change.
Thank you. Dr. Nuran, as you mentioned, the finance is the big in the agenda of COP27 and 28. Given the lack of commitment of many countries to this date for financial pledges, does this remain the preferred strategy, or there are more effective and alternative to develop sustainable climate finance solutions?
Are you referring to the net zero in specific?
Yep.
Okay, so so far the net zero approach has not gained traction in the MENA region. There is still a lot that needs to be done. What a lot of the MENA countries are looking at is adaptation as well, alongside the mitigation aspects. So because net zero is focused on climate mitigation, a lot of the efforts, there needs to be support on, if they're unable to commit to net zero immediately, at least that they should explore pathways to net zero. And this is something that we're looking into currently with a number of banks. And one of the projects that we're having is to develop a guidance document on how the banking institution can have a pathway to net zero. What would be relevant, what would be attainable to them, and how can they reach that so that we enhance their readiness for a net zero commitment. Sometimes when there is a lot of traction within on an institutional level, this also creates momentum that can build up to regulatory support. And there is generally a need for support, legislative, regulatory framework, and support things to help in this transition. But on the adaptation side as well, because there is, as I mentioned, that the funding gap that is available, the majority of sources of funding that are received in the MENA region are focused on mitigation and not on adaptation, in a region that the GHG emissions, if you look at the MENA region, it is not the top emitting regions around the world. So we also need to address the adaptation side, because the MENA region would need to work on adaptation immediately, and we need the private sector engagement on that, because the gap between the public finance and then the private finance, there is a huge difference here, and we need to kind of push the banking institutions to support and push the private sector to get engaged with that. And I believe one of the projects that we ran last year is that we looked at how a new approach to a holistic methodology can unlock private sector solutions for climate finance and so on. And it was done through a research and rounds of reflection with a group of public and private sector actors. And I think it's very important that we bring those two sides on the same table, because we need to understand what the private sector are looking at, because at the end of the day, also they're profit-making entities. So we need to be speaking their language, but also there are needs on a country level and on the public sector that we need to create this conversation and this dialogue so that we can find the common points and ensure that the financing that is being challenged from the private sector actually benefits the needs of the country, and that the needs of the country can also be translated into financing solution and so on and so forth. And in this approach and in this dialogue that can be created, we can accelerate the reach for the net zero, for adaptation, and for climate action more broadly.
Thank you, Nuran. I think we are out of time by now. I would like our esteemed panelist, Sheikh Shamma, Dr. Nuran, also Professor Asad, and Mr. Osama Al-Johari, for this fruitful discussion. And with that, I would like to hand it to my colleague Sumaya.
Thank you, Awad. Thank you, Your Highness, Sheikh Shamma, Professor Asad, Osama, and Dr. Nuran. Now we'll go to a 5-minute break and we'll resume at 10:35. Welcome back, everyone. We will now begin with the second and final panel of the day, titled Multilateral Green Security Initiatives, the Start of a New Green Era Towards Collective Environmental Security in the Middle East. This panel will be moderated by our dear friend, Mr. Mohammed Al-Mulla, who is the founder and director of Diwan Al-Mulla Network in the state of Kuwait.
شكرا اخت سمية على هذا
Thank you,
التقديم
Sister Sumaya, for this introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all
الكريمة ويمكن لاحظنا
for this
خلال
generous invitation, and that you've noticed in the last 2 years, yesterday, 2 days, yesterday and today, and this conference, which has been meetings, very unique, very exceptional, covering an important topic, which is the initiatives for green economy, sustainable economy. It's been very interesting, and there has been a lot of studies that have been put forth, which we'll see some of them at the end of the conference, which will be distributed, and they will all become beacons and a future pathway for mankind, which is trying to, for the entire planet, to create a secure and sustainable security, food security, and green economy, and how to designate investments for this. Ladies and gentlemen,
وهي تعتبر
I
الجلسة
would like to introduce, and this is considered the last of our meetings that we're having, which we've been having for the last 2 days regarding green economy. Today, I have very exceptional guests, and of course, usual to trends, this is very common to them to have very exceptional people always to come and speak. Today, from Saudi Arabia, Dr. Noura Al-Mansouri. Hello, doctor. Hello, how are you? Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor for us to have this communication with you, and we're very happy for what you are about to present to us. Of course, Dr. Noura Al-Mansouri
مركز الملك عبد الله
is a
للدراسات
researcher in King Abdullah University in the area of energy, and has a degree from the University of Massachusetts, and a member of the International Energy Organization. Also, with us, a dear brother, Mr. Hamid Al-Ka'bi, who works with the Al-Ittihad news outlet, and Mr. Ali Abdurrahman Al-Amadi, a researcher at Trends for Consulting, who is in the administration. Our speakers, each one has about 10 minutes to speak about what we are about to present regarding the initiatives of a green era, which will be hopefully a group effort in the Middle East. And my first question is to Dr. Noura Al-Mansouri. Dr. Mansouri, one of the biggest challenges in our region, especially in the Gulf, is the lack of water. As you know, it's a desert region, and most countries right now are thinking of trying to get away from fossil fuel. Tell us about the scarcity of water and how the Gulf country has been trying to solve this. Do you think, Dr. Mansouri, that the countries of the Gulf are going to be trying to rely on other sources for energy? Thank you. To answer this question, we would have to actually try to understand the image of the energy. First, we're trying to ensure both sides. We have to not let go of energy, but also to find. If I could give a presentation of my slides, if I may. Yes, please go ahead, doctor. And from your presentation, we will see. Are the slides ready? Go ahead, doctor. Okay. I'm going to talk about the circular carbon economy approach. The agenda that we'll have is the balancing the United Nations development goals and the trade-off between energy and security, environmental security. And then I will talk about the current events and then the challenges facing the Arab world around energy, security and environment and food. And also I'll end by shedding light some circular carbon economy approach. The next one, please. We know we have 17 goals for the sustainable development to develop what we do, but there are some goals specifically among these which are very fundamental and crucial compared to the other goals. We have number 7, which is providing reliable, sustainable, and modern energy sources that are affordable and at a cost that suits all. And also goal number 13, which is taking urgent actions to tackle climate change and its impacts. Of course, number 7 is a critical prerequisite to achieving most of the sustainable development goals. So access to reliable and safe energy is critical to enabling economic and social development and improving health, education, and livelihoods. Next one, please. Of course, there's a trade-off between energy security and environment. There's about 30% of the world of the population still lacks modern electricity. I mean, there's 3 billion people depend on wood, coal, or animal waste for cooking and heating. And on the other hand, there's a steady temperature rising about 1.26 degrees Celsius. The oceans have warmed, of course. The amounts of snow and ice have diminished, and the sea level has risen. So that's why we need a very important effort to tackle this. That's why, like I said, the sea levels and the snow and ice that have diminished, which are a big problem. So if you look at the current events, the effects of the conflict in Ukraine have affected many sectors, supplies disruptions, energy prices, and price inflation, and the economical recession and food prices. And all of this is a strong reminder that the price of energy is not being steady. The climate also becomes even more affected by this. We've seen this with the emergencies, the health emergencies, like during COVID, and what came after COVID, and what happened in the Ukraine recently. So that's why it shows that the energy is very important, very crucial to all of these things. If we look at the energy crisis in Europe as an example, we see that there is a return to coal as an alternative to Russian fuel, which is a clear contradiction to the COP26 pledge to reduce coal, also to redo efforts with development countries for investments aimed to exploring more hydrocarbons. Germany is everything to do with this with the Senegal, and Italy with North African countries. So the European energy crisis has neglected the possibly derailed climate ambitions, ignoring the EU Green Deal and the last 3-month agreements, which was right after the crisis. And that is why we saw that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's continuous investments in exploring and the production in the upstream has made it one of the last reliable sources of reserve production in the world. So the Saudi Arabia has committed itself to continuing to develop its vast hydrocarbon resources, which are characterized by their low cost and carbon emissions compared to high-cost resources. On the other hand, the global spare production capacity is fading at a high rate, especially when the continued growth in demand for oil in light of the current events has changed. There's a need to develop hydrocarbon resources in order to avoid future energy crises to meet global energy needs at affordable prices. There is less than 50 days until COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, and recognition to the climate change world, we see that there is language, a very determined language mentioned. So the recognition of the climate change is going to be one of the most important things, 1.5 degrees Celsius, and reducing carbon dioxide by 45% by 2030, and the net zero, what we're trying to achieve by 2050. A relentless phase out of the inefficient coal fossil fuel subsides. Do we expect to see the goals to become more ambitious going forward? And so on and so forth. There is a very urgent need to change the agendas and the mindset of the developing energies, especially going towards 2020. Since 2020, especially seeing what we're seeing. We see that the reliability of the dependence of Arab countries on imported wheat from Russia and Ukraine, and this has created a great crisis right now in nutrition and food security. Like 90% in Lebanon is not 90%, in Sudan and Egypt and so on is very high, the reliance on the grain. The percentage of the people in the Arab nations who have access to electricity is reasonably good, but there are countries which are much less developed, and these problems will increase with the conditions getting worse and worse. And we look at the energy intensity versus the primary energy consumption per capita. These are not sustainable. Like, for example, in Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, their per capita is close to the United States consumption. So there are challenges in energy security. When we look at health and geopolitics, when it comes to energy security, we have to keep all options open when it comes to trying to find solutions for this and to find a practical climate strategy for more sustainability. That's why we have to take into consideration the uniqueness of all of the resources in every country, and which every country can contribute to the group effort. That's why we have to balance to ensure energy security. The biggest challenges that we have in reducing carbon emissions is heavy industries and heavy transportation. 1/3 of the international emissions, which is 10 gigawatts from carbon dioxide. We have to. That's why we think the energy has to be moved and shifted towards greener energy. And there are also water scarcity challenges in the Arab region, which are those under the freshwater resources. And there are the ones who are, this 500, the numbers of 500 cubic meters per individual. Energy and consumption challenges.
There are energy consumption challenges in the Arab region, energy consumption per capita, and that will have impacts on emission challenges in the Arab region. Next. So the summary is that there are sustainability obstacles summary in the Arab regions. There are air quality, water, energy, food security, climate change, air quality, the division between urban and rural areas, conflict and political instability. So there is this consumption of electricity that's going to increase. As we said, air quality, CO2 increased from 4 to 7.5 tons. The division between urban and rural areas, of course, the Arab cities are among the 20 most polluted cities in the world. Political crises and conflicts in the Arab region. Now, I would like, please, there is also the contribution of the circular carbon economy approach to global climate governance. Government priorities and shifting global policy agendas lead to ineffective global climate management. So we need, of course, diversity in crisis. We have climate change and a global priority that requires urgent solutions. We have collective actions in order to have some security in the process. Next slide is, of course, circular carbon economy approach. It's a new approach that will introduce the concept of a circular carbon economy, a new way to approach climate change, migration goals that values all options and encourages all efforts to reduce atmospheric carbon accumulation through the 4 Rs. Maybe I will come to the end of my presentation, and I hope we will have the opportunity to discuss this item further. I have a question, depending on your presentation, and candidly, is there a commitment from the majority of countries in terms of application of this process? We know that there is investment regarding environment and projects pertaining to green economy and security, especially in the Saudi Arabia. We see a lot of projects. We see that the commitment is there. There are so many projects regarding the green security. It's a big project. Speaking about the Middle East, there is also UAE that is committed through major projects, mega projects. We're talking here about investment in the green security. In summary, Dr. Noura, where do you see this commitment? As I said, the Gulf countries and the Arab Saudi Arabia has a lot of commitments, so they are looking forward the net zero 2060 that will mainly focus and target the carbon to emissions to 2060, 2050 in UAE, and the roadmap towards that is very clear. There are so many initiatives in diversifying the economic diversification. There is like the Red Sea project and also other projects that aim the diversification of revenues and income. But in parallel, project that will lead the attainment of economic projects. There is the green project in Saudi Arabia that is targeting 10 billion trees in the area in the Middle East. There is also another initiatives that are reducing 4% of the emissions in the world as at 2030. In addition to that, there are so many plans for renewable energy, 50% renewable energy for 2030, and so many projects, so many initiatives that are in line. Thank you. Do you think that other countries are serious regarding this, and there are variable seriousness regarding that? The load is falling on the shoulders of developed countries. We are more serious, especially when we talk about the environment financing. We have not yet reached the target, but we're working towards that. Thank you so much. There is another question. We are now going to give the floor to Abdulrahman Awadi, who is like a researcher at Trends, who is also a counselor at the strategic. Thank you, Magdar Al-Hashi. Now we would like to give the floor to her. Thank you. There is a question, one of the questions that are important today. What are the ambitions of governments? We know that this topic of green security may be taken as a kind of luxury and may not be taken seriously. So what is the commitment of governments within low-income or poor countries to renew their resources and invest in this regard? And thank you so much for this presence. I am really honored to be here in this event.
To answer your question, I'd like to first begin by setting up what I believe to be the economic aspect of multilateral collaborations. As the theme of the conference and yesterday's discussions have made abundantly clear and have highlighted, there are strong connections between climate change, planning for risks at the climate security nexus, and securing a long-term economic sustainability or security through private sector involvement and multilateral collaboration. And if in the future we are to speak about having achieved environmental security in the MENA region, then that security must necessarily be long-term and must extend over a long time frame. For that to be the case, any environmental initiatives proposed must also be economically sustainable over that time duration. So sustainability in this case refers to both environmental sustainability as well as economic sustainability. Equally, because nations do not recognize because nature does not recognize national borders nor arbitrary industrial categorizations, Any effective environmental solution must also be cross-cutting, and it must be a multilateral initiative involving collaboration across the board. This means intergovernmental agreements as well as interdisciplinary solutions. And so this calls for a radical redefinition of national or even regional security, to your point and to your question, as necessitating collaboration and as also intrinsically tied to both economic and environmental sustainability. Focusing on the MENA region, before I go to the developing countries, focusing on the MENA region and particularly, the Middle East is the most water-stressed region in the world, with over 60% of its population living in high water-stressed areas. This is compared to a 35% global benchmark, which means that it's in the region's best interest to corroborate over joint environmental targets, including water security, because water security informs food security, and both water and food security are threatened globally by the climate crisis. So water security in this case exemplifies that the climate security nexus in the MENA region. And indeed, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change states that global emissions must be halved by 2030 if we are to keep global warming within the 1.5 degrees Celsius limit agreed by the Paris Agreement. And this is only achievable if everyone acts now, and this is our only chance at attaining environmental security for the region and for the world. So how do we address this problem? We first begin by characterizing the biggest challenges to environmental security in the region as being multilateral commitment and economic and financial sustainability. And I argue that investments in the three following arenas are the only way for us to secure environmental security in the region and in the world. First, promoting the private sector. Second, promoting consumer agency and climate literacy. And third, promoting research and development. Let's begin with the first. Promoting the private sector is important for two reasons. It provides the level of innovation and technology needed at scale to make an adequate impact, and it also ensures the long-term fiscal sustainability through avoiding an excessive drain on governmental resources. But how do we promote the private sector to begin with? We can do this by incentivizing major investments in renewable energy and infrastructure, energy efficiency, clean transport, alternative low-carbon materials, sustainable food systems, natural carbon sinks, as well as other business model innovations. But also, more importantly perhaps, we must leverage the financial markets towards a green transition, as many panelists before me have also indicated. Green investments or investments in environmentally positive or environmentally neutral endeavors should be normalized. They should become the norm. And in fact, green financing in the MENA region has gone from under $1 billion in 2016 to over $18 billion by 2021. But that figure is still not enough. We still have a long way to go. And so promoting the private sector would be really important. We can further do that by activating regional partnerships and initiatives aimed at increasing resiliency and climate security risks, and that's through joint investments and promising technology. But most importantly, we need to ensure that the long-term financial sustainability of the solutions, and we can best do this by promoting entrepreneurial activities in climate-related topics. And that brings me to my second solution, which was investing in research and development to promote innovation. And this is perhaps the best key to securing environmental security, both in the region and the world. But as countries commit to net zero targets, high-emitting producers like chemical and cement industries will require significant investments to transform their infrastructure and develop new business models that really accommodate this green transition. And we can do this by boosting innovation in supporting research and development, but also commercializing technology that addresses climate change at scale, including in agriculture and other fields. But I think Masdar does this beautifully. Masdar is a UAE-based company that really, I think, demonstrates how radical and innovative applied research and development can be. And one example of one of their initiatives is the air-to-water initiative, which transforms water vapor into drinkable water through solar-powered devices. So that's really innovative and really revolutionary. And another thing we can do to increase investments in research and development is promoting regional scientific research on climate change. We can do this through public and privately funded grants, but also we can think of other ways of incentivizing researchers in the region to really focus on climate change and take into account the affordances as well as the constraints of the region while we produce new cutting-edge knowledge. And finally, my last solution would be promoting consumer agency to enhance universal commitment. And to achieve environmental security in the region, both governments and individuals alike must demonstrate unwavering responsibility and unwavering commitment to solving the climate crisis. And according to a survey conducted by the Barometer Department at Trends Research and Advisory on Middle Easterners' perception on climate change, Middle Easterners tend to overinflate the role of the government in combating the climate crisis, while at the same time underestimating the individual agency in response to the climate crisis. According to the survey, around 60% of the Middle Eastern respondents believed that governments were responsible to combating the crisis, compared to a 30% world average. Yet the same Middle Eastern respondents were more skeptical on average that the world benchmark of the 1.5 degree Celsius Paris Agreement target was at all even achievable. So that's a problem, and that needs to be, for us to achieve environmental security in the region and for the world, that needs to be solved. And so key players in the region must invest in cultivating a mindful and empowered consumer culture, one which clarifies the role of the individual, but is also modeled by all the institutions around them, be they public or private. And COP27 and 28 and the climate-focused weeks and other campaigns that really promote awareness, as posited yesterday by the UAE Minister of Tolerance and Culture, will be a great opportunity to increase climate literacy in the region and also empower the citizens to take the climate crisis into their own hand. And with regards to recommendations, we can strengthen the overall public engagement and awareness of climate-oriented topics through the media as well as public-oriented outreach. But we must also strengthen the concept of individual responsibility. And to do this, we can perhaps think of integrating environmentally and sustainable development concepts into school curriculum, keeping in mind the potential of sparking unnecessary climate anxiety and really getting stuck in this hopeless case scenario. Because I would like to end by reminding everyone that the climate crisis is not a hopeless case. It's just we need to take actions now, sooner rather than later, in order to ensure environmental security. And to finally answer your question on development.
معاش دقيقة.
Okay, yes, I can definitely do that. To answer your question on development, we need to...
You have one last minute.
Abundantly clear that environmental security is attached to national, regional, and global security at this point. So we need to reframe the narrative that developing countries have a future without securing their environment first. That's a given. I don't think there is no hope for humanity or for their water crisis, for their food security crisis, or for any other development project to succeed if the climate isn't secured first. But to do this and to be realistic, again, the whole point is to secure a long-term financial structure. We need to make the attractive in developing markets. We need to make the market in the developing region more attractive, and we can do this by incentivizing private sector investment through regulation and legislation that makes the market bigger and makes it more attractive. And finally, as many panelists before me have noted, participation in multilateral regional initiatives to pool risks and still reap rewards would be crucially important. Before me, a speaker mentioned the United Nations Environmental Program, and that's just one of many, many examples in that regard.
مشكورة.
Thank you.
ضحكت علي finally
And you got one over me now, actually, and you took some time to yourself. I'm going to go to dear brother, Mr. Hamd Al-Ka'bi from the Ittihad newspaper. And the question for you is the media platforms and the interest of media regarding this topic. Of course, media should have a very large role to make the world aware and specialists to be more connected about this thing. Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. Thank you for moderating this meeting. And I'd like to thank my colleagues who preceded me, who enriched us with so much knowledge. And I would like to thank Trends Center and the Atlantic Council for putting this whole event together, and Dr. Muhammad Ali also for his care and considering media being one of the most important components of this whole thing, and all the team who have worked on creating the success around this forum. I have a question. Who of you reads scientific papers? Please raise your hands. Talal, do you read scientific papers? Now, don't be shy. For myself, I do not actually read scientific papers. Dr. Anoda, yeah, and I write and I read, of course. Thank you, Doctora. But the reason I'm asking the public is, and if it's abroad, it's a question for everyone. This is a little test on site thing that I did, and the result that I saw will be very useful in opening our eyes. So, where did this awareness come from? This mass awareness come from? Come to us. The answer is, with no doubt, it came from the media. Without media, science will not have a voice. Media is the tongue, the voice, and the role of media is as important as the science itself. So statistics show that scientific papers and researches are read by 3 to 7 individuals when published. That means the news of them does not leave where it was produced. But important researches are sent around by the wings of the media all around the world. The most important thing that we have right now today is climate change, which is facing all of mankind. And we have seen this last summer the dry weathers and what it did all over Europe, like His Excellency Sultan said and presented, how we saw the climate change as we live it. So climate is so important that it needs everyone's collaboration. And this can be done through media, which is endowed by the responsibility of trying to change habits and to convince everyone towards sustainable development. And it could be the difference between a dead planet and a planet that's alive.
How can we ensure that our mandate is conducted to the best of its ability? We, as media members, are faced with the importance of climate change through personal experience. This theme is very important. You will not feel the climate change effects while you're shopping at a supermarket. You know that the decisions we made in terms of consumption really have immediate effects on the planet. The role of the media is very important. Everyone should feel the importance of that topic and the impacts that it creates on our daily life. Fortunately, we live within an environment of technological revolution, and the media are capable of attracting attention through various ways. It also shapes the experience, and it creates the best experience for the person to receive the news. The media plays a major role in order to put us in this virtual world and helps us to feel the experience. The second obstacle that we're facing today is the complexity of science. It's very important to relay the message in a simple and clear way that doesn't need an expert to assimilate it. It's very important for the receiving party to be sensitized to the importance of the matter. Number three, the media and the traditional media are not enough in order to treat this theme of this importance. 90% of youth receive the news from media outlets. This is why it is important to have media at all platforms. It has become of crucial importance. not only for this media to be present with names, but also to be provided, to be endowed with the specific content. The media has to design scientific message that will be designed to the nature of the recipient. The success of the media message is felt from one population to another, from one country to another. 9% only from the population in Italy consider that the climate change is a serious matter. 37% in Sweden, of the population in Sweden, feel the importance and the impact of climate change, and this depends on the power of the media to relay the message. This is the reason why in Al-Ittihad journal we became conscious of the importance of this matter, and we were committed to educate and sensitize the audience to the importance of this matter. When we look at the climate change, you see that at the Ittihad journal, you will see that there are more than 3,000 media outlets regarding the realities of the climate change in all its forms, in all its ways. It is not surprising to see that the Emirates media to benefit from the efforts that it has invested. There are Emirates leaders that have proven the importance of this climate change. It is the first country in North Africa and the Middle East to give such an importance to climate change. It has shed light to many initiatives regarding the preservation and of the fighting climate change. There is the renewable energy, green hydrogen initiatives, and also the diversification of agricultural systems, and so many activities that of sustainability in the climate change. Not only media has given importance to this topic, but there are so many activists that have created a roadmap and have sensitized the public to this importance. They have created and they have invested greatest efforts through the zero net initiative to 2050. To sum up, and by and large, I would like to end with this story. And on February 28th in 2016, Leonardo DiCaprio, actor, received an Oscar as the best actor, and he made a speech that was unexpected in its nature. He did not talk about cinema, but he talked about climate change. He really warned every day, he warned people to the threat of climate change. And then following this speech, millions and millions have started to research the topic. The interest has increased in the media. This is thanks to the effort of one person. What Leonardo DiCaprio did during his speech is very important. It is our interest. It is our mission to forward our consciousness to the people, and to this. The lesson learned from all of this is that if you can create an attractive media message, the audience will receive it with open arms. The individual's behaviors will change, and accordingly, the planet will change and the future will change accordingly. Thank you.
Mr. Hamad, thank you so much, sir. I'd like to come back, Dr. Noura. We have only minutes left. Dr. Noura, if you have something that what was said so far from some of the speakers, and also, do you think that media is paying enough attention when it comes to climate and climate change? If we could hear a few words from you, please. Thank you, sir. I would like to comment on what my colleague said. Of course, media is very important, and it does help in changing individual decisions, which are very important. But the effort on climate is much wider than that. It requires work on the level of nations in the world and on the individual. That's why we should try to expedite all efforts on all levels. I really like the story. Like there are as many, what you said, there's many articles and many papers and researches, but to gauge the level of effectiveness of these research efforts and papers is also very important. That's why it is, I think Leonardo DiCaprio his word might be more penetrative and gets to more people, more readers, more listeners, more viewers. I expect that all efforts are blessed and required, and all efforts have to be there to help to create a difference and a change in mindset and decisions when it comes to individuals and society. So I think all requirements are needed to achieve environmental goals. My brother Hamid, I come to you. I would like to ask you, as the Ittihad newspaper, why did you adopt the climate? Is it I mean, why is it? Is it just that was it a journalistic interest? If you could explain. Ittihad newspaper always looks for what is important to mankind and society. And of course, we do rely, or we do take from the general agenda of the nation, the Emirates, for example. And the first, and it's on the top of the list for our country. It's very sensitive, it's very important, and it touches everyone and every human being very directly. That's why this issue goes. That's why looking the other way is going to affect everyone's energy, nutrition, life itself, and the environment that they live in. That's why it is the most important issues and the most important portfolios that we look at and care about in the Emirates. So the Emirates is at the forefront in the national community, but now today in the Ittihad newspaper, we've also noticed this issue and have adopted adopted it, and we see it being very important, and that now we are looking for a proper content to attract people's attention and minds, and to use media to the fullest. Mr. Mohammed, my question is, why is Trend Center looking into bringing many specialists from all around the world and to do their work through the Atlantic Council? Why does Trend care about bringing so many people in? Yes, Trends
at the forefront of all the think tanks in the region and in the world. But we're getting there. We're really expanding our global outreach. But we want to be like I said, the leading thinkers in the region. And so linking back to our presentation and this entire conference, there is no future without environmental security. So climate really is at the forefront of anything we can talk about. It seeps its way into all the industries and all the other discussions. So it would be a big miss if we didn't focus on it. So yeah, that's why.
شكرا. دكتورة نور بنختم معاك كلمة أخيرة.
Dr. Noor, if we could get a final word from you, please. I think it's very important to recognize and to understand all of the resources of energy, and to know the sources and help into trying to develop technology around them, and to encourage individual decisions, which is more sustainable. Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you all to my guests, and Mr. Hamid Al-Ka'bi, the Chief Editor of Al-Ittihad, Dr. Noor Mansouri, who is at the King Abdullah Center, and hope to see you soon in more participation in future events. And Dr. Ali, Ms. Ali Abdullah, and we wish you all the success. We've come to the end of this meeting. We would like to thank Trend Center for Studies for bringing these workshops together. And I'm sure that we have benefited so much, and all researchers have. And I would like to thank Atlantic Council for hosting us all and for their interest and bringing all of these capabilities to create an environment for this wonderful forum in Washington. Thank you all. Thank you all, and goodbye.
Well,
Thank you all, everyone who is here in person and everyone who is watching online over our website, over any of the streaming services. Thank you for taking part in this conference. This has really been an absolutely fascinating set of discussions on one of, if not the most important issue of our time. Today's discussion, reaffirms that we live in an era of immense climate risks and challenges that must be met with persistence, with collaboration, with partnerships of the kind that is exemplified by the one between the Atlantic Council and our esteemed partner, Trends Research and Advisory, headquartered in Abu Dhabi. Few regions in the world are going to be hit as hard by climate change as the Middle East. Therefore, we decided that this year, right in advance of COP27 to be held in Sharm el-Sheikh, and in anticipation of COP28 to be held in Dubai next year, it's really critical for our second annual conference in partnership with Trends to highlight the issue of climate change, because this is going to be one of the most important issues for the Middle East and North Africa, but really the world going forward. This year's conference included a bevy of real fascinating experts from NGOs, from governments, from multilateral organizations like the UN, the World Bank, the World Health Organization. And what we all learned is that much of this region is already in harsh climate zones, and global warming aggravates desertification, water stress, it leads to severe issues of economic disruptions, food security is undermined, public health is undermined, has lasting effects on poverty, on inequality, on displacement, on conflict, on security in every aspect of the word. These disruptions require decisive and bold action. Here at the Atlantic Council, our goal is to work together to secure the future with our allies and partners. And Trends in the UAE are some of the most far-sighted partners that we work with on this set of issues. There's no doubt in my mind that the insights presented at this conference will not only reinforce our understanding of this problem and its various repercussions, particularly in the Middle East, but it will also contribute to strengthening our common efforts aimed at achieving sustainable security over the long term, and to inform regional and international decision makers who have to confront the very difficult trade-offs that are inherent to dealing with climate change. I'd like to close by expressing my most sincere thanks to everyone who participated in this event, all of the speakers and the dignitaries across the 2 days and 5 sessions, for making this conference a huge success. It will live on our website and on YouTube for additional audiences in the weeks and months ahead to take the time to really internalize all of the messages that have been given today. And of course, I want to end by thanking once again Trends for helping bring together so many prominent thinkers from around the Middle East with us, and for their support and partnership with the Atlantic Council's Middle East programs and our Scowcroft Middle East Security Program specifically. Now let me introduce my colleague and esteemed partner, Samaya Al-Hadrami, the Deputy Chief Global Officer at Trends Research and Advisory, to provide recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. William. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to present to you the recommendations of the conference. The first theme focusing on climate security nexus, which is food security, water security, climate resilient health systems, and enhanced resilience to climate-driven migration. By making the climate security nexus and achieving resilience an integral part of the international climate change dialogue, and develop common resilience and adaptation frameworks, policies, and tools. To build the science-policy interface by promoting regional scholarship by researchers examining the climate security nexus, and to develop climate-resilient and sustainable health systems like such in countries as Bahrain, Egypt, Iran, Jordan, Oman, Morocco, Pakistan, Palestine, Tunisia, UAE, and Yemen, to minimize the health impacts of climate change. Also to integrate a climate and health lens to reflect the cascading effects of climate change. Moving on to the second theme is to focus on implementation of negotiated multilateral climate outcomes by enhancing implementation of negotiated climate outcomes by aligning national agendas through legislation and regulation, mobilizing finance and providing capacity building. Incentivize major investments in renewable energy technology and infrastructure, energy efficiency, clean transport, alternative low-carbon materials, sustainable food systems, natural carbon sinks, and business model innovations. Also, putting in place early framework conditions for transformational change in energy transition and deploy advanced decarbonization technologies for difficult sectors such as steel, cement, and fertilizers production facilities, which are sectors difficult to decarbonize given their demand. As the MENA region has a locational advantage given it can synchronize growth and the new investment in these production facilities and preparing the infrastructure required for decarbonization. The third theme is using private sector technology and innovation to achieve larger scale climate impacts, and that's by boosting innovation through supporting the commercialization of promising technologies that address climate security nexus issues at scale, including smart agriculture and others, and to activate regional partnerships and initiatives aimed at increasing resilience to climate security risks through joint investment in promising resilience-enhancing technologies. Promoting innovation and research on climate change and energy transition technologies to achieve technological or innovation breakthroughs, and enhancing the role of private sector and local banks, as many local banks lack the capacity to understand renewable energy projects, invest in capacity building of local banks to enable them to support and finance renewable energy projects. Yet, we must also balance the financial support between project facilitation and making finance available to finance projects. Providing guidance documentation on how banking institutions can create pathways to net zero and the need to address the adaptation sides. The MENA region should begin working on that immediately. The gap between public and private finance is huge, and there is a need to support the private sector to get engaged. The final theme for the conference is to strengthen individual and societal responsibility for climate action in the region, strengthening overall public engagement and awareness of climate-related issues through media campaigns, public lectures, and initiatives such as declaring a whole year as a year of the environment, integrating environmental and sustainable development concepts into school curricula, and developing a mandatory environmental studies course for all university students. Finally, we must emphasize the importance of behavioral changes, especially in the use of water, as the per capita water use in the Middle East is 300 to 700 liters per person at the moment. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as we conclude this conference, we at Trends Research and Advisory would like to express our sincere thanks and appreciation to our partners at the Atlantic Council, particularly the Scowcroft Middle East Security Initiative, for their constructive cooperation and partnership in organizing this conference in a way that exceeded our expectations. We are keen on continuing and expanding this cooperation to promote security, development, and peace in the region and the world. On behalf of Trends Research and Advisory and the Atlantic Council, please allow me to thank our eminent speakers, including most notably His Excellency Sheikh Nahyan bin Mbarak Al Nahyan, UAE Cabinet Member and Minister of Tolerance, Sheikh Hashamma bin Sultan bin Khalifa Al Nahyan, Executive Director of UAE Independent Climate Change Accelerators, His Excellency Dr. Sultan Ahmed Al Jaber, UAE Minister of Industry and Advanced Technology, and UAE Climate Change Special Envoy, His Excellency David Livingston, Senior Advisor, U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, and Her Excellency Maryam bint Mohammed Al Mheri, UAE Minister of Climate Change and Environment. I would also like to extend my sincere thanks to all our speakers for their valuable contributions, as well as the wonderful team at Trends Research and Advisory and the Atlantic Council, who spared no efforts to make this conference a success. I hope to see you all soon at a future event. Thank you.